All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas Podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, up there in New York City.
New York City.
It's so good.
I think it's
a great
getting better as I do it. I'd like to think, anyway.
I think you are. That's Fangraphs Jon Tayler with the beautiful skyline of the Big Apple right behind him.
And the slight reflection of the TV.
Well,
I don't know if you can actually see that. Can you see the TV reflection in the window?
Well, let's not push on the TV aspect of this, because I don't know if that's a legal thing. Let's not.
Oh, so what you're saying is I should put a movie on right now?
Yeah, definitely that. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And make sure it's as loud as humanly possible to make sure there's a crossover, not just for the video element of this show, but also for the audio.
Yeah, of course. Because I want people to be able to hear at a slight distant, but still noticeable volume what's going on.
Right. That's what we want. So if you can make that happen, that'd be great. And I'm just 1,000% all the way here for all of that. Jon Tayler, how are you doing, sir?
I am doing all right. Just watched the end of the ALDS. The both championship series are now set. We are one round closer to the World Series, or one round closer to a championship. As obviously not a Yankees fan, can't really say I enjoyed those last two ALDS games, but you know what? The Yankees were always the favorite to advance in that series anyway. What are you going to do? I mean, that Cleveland was a good team, but I think you could see throughout the series, they're a resilient team, a talented team. But I think you could definitely see the ways in which they were not a true contender, that there was still some real big gaps on that roster when it comes to being able to make a deeper postseason push. And, kudos to them for taking it to 5 games. They had 2 chances, obviously, to finish in advance. They lost both, but definitely a better result, I think, at the very least, a better performance against the Yankees, even though at the same time, I think what we saw of this Yankees team in the postseason reinforces a lot of what we saw of them during the regular season, which is to say hyper talented, but deeply inconsistent, and really seems like you don't know what you're going to get from day to day. So yeah, I'm doing good. I'm enjoying these playoffs. So this has been wild, watching the fans in Philly and San Diego just go absolutely buck wild with those division series upsets. Was a lot of fun. But yeah, I really liked it.
It was pretty good. It's also just, look, the sky is not falling, Jon Tayler. For the folks that were really concerned about, what does this mean specifically? John, Keith Olbermann on Twitter, very upset about the 100 plus win teams, specifically the Mets and the Dodgers, specifically those 2 teams, and only those 2 teams who won over 100 regular season games and were eliminated. That was the focus of everyone, not just Olbermann, of who lost earlier than most had anticipated in baseball. And there was a 3rd team, but I cannot put my finger.
The Mets, the Braves, and the Dodgers were the.
Was the Braves the 3rd team?
How did I completely miss that you were being right over my head? That's embarrassing. Okay, let's look. I know it's easy for you to forget about the Braves, deep as you've been in just listening to Rocky Top over and over again for the last 72 hours now at this point.
Yeah. Braves had to die for the Rocky Top renaissance.
Look, if you could have chosen one of them to sacrifice, I know which one you would have chosen.
Well, here's the difference. The Braves won last year.
Exactly. John. That's what I'm saying.
Once you've won one, I'm a firm believer in, you can't really complain for a decade. You got the ring. Everything after this, you had the run.
It's great.
Yeah. I'm not stressing. It's fine. They'll be back next year. And this winter, the Braves are gonna have a totally normal winter. Very normal. Things are great.
Entirely normal.
But yeah, so I just thought that was interesting because there was a lot of skies falling. Oh, the new format, it's just going to be all these wild card teams advancing. And then lo and behold, the AL and the NL are completely different in that the NL has 2 surprises in the Pods and the Phillies, and in the AL, the exact two teams that everyone figured going into the 2022 Major League Baseball season withstood the Mariners of the world, the Guardians, those fun teams that made it in the NL. They didn't in the pot, and we're getting Astros, Yankees in the AL. So
For the third time in the last 6 years, an Astros Yankees ALCS.
right. So guess what? Getting more teams in Major League Baseball postseason did not kill the value of being a very good regular season team. And that if you win 100+ games or you're a very good regular season team, that does not mean you are all going to get wiped out
No, it's
by the
just
lesser teams. Yeah.
sometimes. I mean, it's funny to think, but like I think the lesson from this all is baseball happens.
Yep.
You know, anything can happen in a short series. Teams better regular season teams have been losing short series in the postseason since the beginning of the postseason. Over for Us, Jay Jaffe wrote a very exhaustive piece kind of looking at the history of that and pretty much concluding that, like, one, this is not exactly new, and it's not really something where you can necessarily say, oh, it's the playoff format's fault. But on the other hand, this is also the kind of more likely end result of a bigger postseason that has more short series rounds, so to speak. Like you just have to accept this as part of baseball. And I also like part of what I don't get is, why is there anyone crying over 100-win teams not winning a championship? Who cares? Why are we trying to, like, why are we being, oh, please, can't someone please think of the super teams? Who cares? Yeah. Like, the fact that the Dodgers haven't won every championship in their reign of being basically the best team in baseball, I don't think makes baseball or MLB a lesser product. I think it just means sometimes in the postseason, shit happens. Billy Beane said it. My shit doesn't work in the playoffs. Sometimes it just doesn't work, you know. And that's not like it's not like the Dodgers who played in the postseason were all that materially different, or better said, are all that materially not different than the team that played in the regular season. They just ran into some bad luck on balls in play. They stopped hitting with runners in scoring position. And I think there were some questionable pitching decisions, both in terms of, I think, starting Tony Gonsolin in Game 3, similar to the Braves starting Spencer Strider in Game 3. I think ultimately you can look back in hindsight and say that was a mistake. And I think some of the bullpen choices that Dave Roberts made were probably not the optimal choices to make. Then again, that happens every postseason. Like, I'm not sure why also there's complaining about something Dave Roberts does every single year. Like, that's just kind of the bargain you get with Dave Roberts. And at the same time, I don't really see anything in there that needs to be fixed, you know? The only way you the only way you change this to be in a place where, oh, the best teams in the regular season also meet for the championship, is if you go to the way things were way back when, before expansion in 69, where it was just the top team in each league automatically wins the pennant and plays in the World Series. And sure, we can go back to that, but I really don't
just watch Angels in the outfield.
Yeah, I really don't think people are going to enjoy or would enjoy the return to that playoff format, though. Like, I don't really think that after, I mean, consider the fact that the Dodgers had a 10-game edge on the Braves for the best record in the National League. The Astros had a roughly, I think, how many wins did the Astros finish with? Like 103, 104? I can't remember off the top of my head.
Something like, I mean, they were,
but they were comfortably ahead of the Yankees for the great majority of the season, or not the great majority, but
I was going to say not the great majority. The Yankees,
at least the second half.
Yeah,
that's true. But so consider with that, we would have known not only who would be winning the pennant, but also who'd be playing in the World Series from like mid-August onward. Yeah. How is that any more fun? Like, don't you think at that point people would just be like, okay, well, the rest of the season doesn't matter unless you're a fan of these two teams later. Like, I don't understand how
postseason, I think, has had the most broad engagement in years. Like, Mariners fans all being in, the Phillies fans all being. No, definitely, this has been a positive.
It's good for the health of the sport if teams like the Padres and the Phillies and the Mariners can not only get into the postseason, but also succeed in it. You can argue and quibble all you want about the methods of getting them into the postseason. And I still don't necessarily like the idea of expanding the postseason, if only because I do worry that the bar for becoming a postseason team gets low enough to the point that owners do not have to spend as much as they should, and that it's going to hurt player financials and economics, because teams are just going to aim, well, at least the theory would be teams will just aim to win 84 games and hope that, you know, when the short season tournament comes around, or short series tournament rather, that they can, you know, just get hot at the right time.
But we're not there yet. We're not
there yet. And at the same time, like, the Phillies, Padres, and Mariners, at least, and Cleveland, at least for the last 2 months of the season, were all legitimately good teams. Were they as good as the Dodgers or the Yankees or the Astros or the Braves or the Mets? No, there was a clear separation in terms of the great teams and the really good teams. But it's not like this isn't like a sub 500 team sneaking into this isn't like the annual AFC South winner managing to make a run to the Super Bowl or something, where they just beat up on crap competition. If Cleveland had won and advanced to the World Series, okay, that's one thing where you're like, they're here in large part because they beat the crap out of the Royals and the Tigers. But then they also went and beat the teams that mattered when it mattered. This is like with the Phillies and Padres too. I think people expected those two teams to be good. I know I didn't particularly, I wasn't particularly on the Phillies bandwagon this offseason. I know you were saying that they could be an NL East title pick. They weren't, but that's only because the Braves and the Mets were so much better much further ahead of them. And ultimately, that's still a pretty good damn team at the end of the day. But regardless, it's good
very
for baseball.
top heavy.
It's good for baseball for there to be. Was anyone really excited about the idea of repeating last year's championship series of getting Braves, Dodgers, and fine, but at least from a narrative standpoint, from an enthusiasm standpoint, from the standpoint of selling the series in terms of you're seeing something new and different. This is better, I think, and I also have I refuse to shed any tears for like Rob Manfred and baseball having a harder time selling Padres Phillies than they would have Braves Dodgers. I don't care. I just want to watch good baseball. If that ends up getting less ratings or worse ratings than the other series would have because it's smaller cities with smaller fan bases.
You're not Rob Manfred. You're not in the front office. It doesn't affect your life at all.
MLB's revenues in 2022 are set to be again over $10 billion for like the fifth year in a row, not counting like 2020. This league makes money hand over fist. Every owner makes money hand over fist. Rob Manfred's salary is not going to go down an iota, a single cent, because he got Padres Phillies instead of Braves.
The worst fan is the one who complains about that, though. Honestly, I can't. That is the worst fan.
Yeah,
the one who complains.
If baseball's dying, why is there so much uproar over this thing happening?
Yeah,
people care. People genuinely care, and I understand that if you're a fan of the Braves or the Dodgers or the Mets, you're probably feeling a little salty that you did all of this throughout the regular season. You were clearly one of the best teams. And then within the span of a week, your season is effectively over. And that sucks. There's no discounting that. That just sucks.
Like college basketball fans are used to this. And I think
exactly. This is how it works in every single postseason. The only difference is like baseball as opposed to football and the NBA and the NHL usually, or better said, those three other leagues and most, or at least in terms of North American sports, professional sports, those three other leagues, and those just, I know obviously we have many other sports beyond that, but those three in particular usually don't have a super great regular season team, multiple super great regular season teams just leading the pack. It's rare that you get an NFL team that goes better than like 13-3. And if they do, it's something like historic. Like it's the undefeated Patriots, or it's
the whole model is built to make everyone go 8-8.
Yes, exactly. It's or same with the NHL, same with the the NBA. It's like the Warriors, the year they broke the Bulls wins record. Like that was obviously something where everyone was like, that's not supposed to happen. Like you're not supposed to be that good at all. Like, whereas I think in baseball, it's like, we've seen that before. Like, remember the 2001 Mariners, the literal record holders of single season wins who went out in the ALCS to the Yankees. Like this happens. It will continue to happen because so long as you have a postseason that has essentially a short series tournament format, a la the NCAA tournament or a la any other structured playoff format in North American sports, this is just going to happen. This is just the reality. Like you are going to divorce regular season results from postseason results. But I think it's a misconception to think that because postseason results don't line up with regular season results, that therefore that means that there was something either wrong with the team or that regular season success does not equate or does not predict with greater confidence postseason success. Like the better team usually still wins. The better team usually wins a series, usually gets to the championship series. Like
that's how it will be. It's going to continue to be that way.
Like for every year where we have
March Madness has 68 teams, and generally speaking, it's still like just 2 years ago, it still ended up with Gonzaga and Baylor in the final
two best
two.
Teams in the country. Yes.
Yeah.
Or even we got an 89 win Braves team winning the World Series last year, but in 2018 we got a Red Sox team that won 108 games. In 2020 we got a Dodgers team that was flat out the best team in baseball, and over the course of a full season probably would have put up a record right alongside the 2022 Dodgers.
That's what we want, variety, different ways to win.
We just want variety. 2016 the Cubs were the best team in baseball and they won the World Series. Like this is how it works sometimes, but then other years you get the 83 win Cardinals, you get the 89 win Braves, you get one of these two NL teams, neither of whom won 90 games, I think.
I don't think either won 90.
One of them is going to play for the World Series, and there's a
Yeah.
pretty good chance one of them wins the World Series. If nothing else, like whoever of Houston or New York makes it to the World Series, they will probably be the favorite, but it's only going to be like 55-45 or 60-40. Like the other percent still exists. Like
Yeah.
a 60-40 chance is not 100-0 chance. And we have to, and like, I think it would behoove a lot of fans to stop pretending that just because a team was really, really good in the regular season means they're automatically going to win a championship. Or better said, stop pretending or acting like a really, really good regular season team should by default win a championship. That's just not how it works. That's not how it's ever worked, except for the way baseball existed when there were half as many teams and there were none west of the Mississippi. Like, if that's what you want, fine. But I don't think most fans would enjoy that.
Just stop watching. That's not where we're going now. Like,
no, if that's what you want, then watch soccer. Watch the Premier League.
Premier League is the thing to watch.
Watch the Bundesliga, where Bayern Munich has won the title like 10 straight years and always finishes the season like 20 points up on the number 2 team. Like, if you just want like regular season dominance to extend into, or to guarantee essentially postseason dominance or a championship, watch one of those. And even then, if you're a soccer fan, you still have something like the Champions League, a short series tournament where the best teams don't always win.
But it's also significantly cooler. Like San Diego, the way they reacted after winning, and Will Myers buying shots, and the fan base reactions, and it's just, you want that. And part of the reason that you want these 83-win teams to play the 100-win teams in the postseason and sometimes win is the reactions and the intensity and like the pressure on those 100-win teams to be like, oh my God, we're in a dogfight. Oh my God, we're going to lose the series. Oh my God, after spending months and months on top, we're actually going down here. Like that's what you want ultimately, is you want that kind of pressure, and you want it to go one or two. Like, you just want that variety.
I thought this country liked underdogs. I thought that was the thing. Where were all these people when Butler was making its NCAA tournament run? You know, or when Lehigh upset Duke in the NCAA tournament? Wasn't everyone cheering for Lehigh? And granted, some of those because everyone hates Duke.
You can get a most recent one. You get the St. Peter's knocking off the Peacocks, the 15 seed, knocking off the Kentucky Wildcats.
New Jersey represents somewhere over there, outside past my window, vaguely is St. Peter's. I think. I don't actually remember what New Jersey town they're in. But yeah, like I like, no one says you have to like it. Again, if you're a fan of the Dodgers or the Mets or the Braves, be upset. That's entirely your right. Like, your team didn't win the championship.
No, Braves fans, I'm going to say this again. You have no right to be upset. I think
if you're a Braves fan, you can be upset that they just got flat out outplayed in the series. Top to bottom beat.
I mean, Strider was not right. Charlie Morton gets hit, and then he has to get pulled. Like, there's a lot of weird stuff. Albies.
I also think that series plays out differently. One, if Albies, like you said, if there is Albies, and two, if Strider doesn't hurt himself right before the season ends. I think that Strider injury ended up being way more consequential.
And then Fried's flu game. Like, Fried was not well in his start. Like,
was he sick in that? I missed that.
He was sick like 10 days. Like, he's had the flu. Like, he was not 100%.
That would explain why he looked so bad.
Yeah.
I mean, part of it I also credited to the Phillies in that game just having a really, really smart approach against him, which was, do not let him throw strikes. Do not let him just get ahead with the curveball. Do not let him get ahead with the fastball and then bury you with curveballs. Hunt his fastballs.
Let him get 2 outs and think everything's okay.
And also be aggressive when you attack him. Like, he's going to throw first pitch strikes. He's going to throw strikes early in the count. Hunt them, hit them, and you'll win. And like, that's the other thing. Like, the Phillies winning was not a fluke. The Padres winning was not a fluke. If the Guardians had won, I don't think it would have been a fluke necessarily. It probably would have felt a little less so than the other, or a little more so maybe than the other two. But San Diego and Philadelphia straight up beat the other team. This isn't something where it's like, oh, there was bad calls made, or I don't look at it even similar to the way like last year's NLCS, where it's like, yeah, the Braves beat the Dodgers, but that Dodgers team was severely compromised by the time they got to that round. And I don't think we necessarily got a fair, even, full series between the two teams at their best. But that's also part of the playoffs. You're never going to get that. There is always going to be someone compromised. There's always going to be injuries. There's always going to be weather delays and off days and weird stuff like that complicates the calendar and messes with performance. That's just what you have to accept as part of the postseason. I think the reaction we're getting from Dodgers and Braves and Mets fans, I think a lot of it is just being harshly reminded, oh yeah, sometimes it doesn't work like that. I think especially for Dodgers fans who now, and I can understand it for them too. It's like this has been 7 straight years roughly of them being the best team in baseball, and they have exactly one World Series to show for it. And it's a World Series that a lot of people, and I don't necessarily agree with it, but I can understand why, a championship that a lot of people think of as, at the very least, like it's got like half an asterisk attached to it because of the short season and because of the weird format. I get that. I understand why those fans would be upset. No one says you have to like it, or no one says you have to like.
The
No one
Braves
says
won
you have to
14
like it.
straight division titles and won one World Series. Like,
Yeah, that's the thing. Like we have examples of this in the past. I remember what well, not remember because you weren't alive. Neither of us were. But you know what the postseason was like before that? The Yankees winning every other World Series. Quite literally every other World Series. They won like 20 out of 50 at one point. Like, is that really what people would like instead? I don't really see how that's any better than the system we currently have.
Well, if you ask any college football fan, they're thrilled at the Alabama dominance over the last 15 years.
I was going to say, like, would baseball fans prefer what college football looks like, where it's the same 4 teams in the postseason every single year, and it always ends with Alabama hoisting a title, or the little crystal egg ball thing, whatever that thing is called? Football? Is it a football? Yeah. The crystal football?
What do they not? What do you not learn anything about college football at Columbia, John? Are the Lions not just really getting you rolling? Yeah.
You know, I've watched them lose to Brown. You know how sad that is.
It's Brown.
Anyway, no, I think
Brown are they the worst Ivy League team in football?
Yeah, it's either them or Dartmouth probably. But yeah, like I also think there's a good thing to fan bases like I love Phillies fans and I hate Phillies fans because Philadelphia fans in general are psychotic in the best and worst ways. But I think it's good for like fans in San Diego and fans in Seattle and fans in Philadelphia and fans in Cleveland to have a feeling like, hey, we can actually win this shit. This is actually something that could happen. You know, that's a good thing for baseball overall. If it means that more fan bases are more engaged and more teams can be more engaged, that's better. And like I said, I still don't know if the expanded postseason format is the way to do that. But, well, it's not going away either. That's the thing. Like, Major League Baseball made a lot of money selling that extra round of games to ESPN. Like, they're not getting rid of that again anytime soon. The owners are not going to want to get rid of that. And even the players who I think probably would like to see a bigger slice of the pie are also not going to get too bent out of shape about doing this again. Because ultimately, more teams in the playoffs means more of those guys get to go to the playoffs. And that's ultimately what they want more than anything, is to have the chance to win a championship.
Absolutely. John,
yes.
This naturally leads us to Jose Abreu being
as one does.
Cup. Do you think this happens?
I don't know. I mean, I'm a little confused as to why the White Sox seem like they're already ready to move on. Like, that team's problem to a large degree was offense, and they decide that the best way to solve that is to get rid of one of the best offensive players of their last like 5 years.
Well, I get that if the White Sox, you don't need to be making any decisions anytime soon. You know what you need to do is Rick Hahn and what is our future with our front office? Like, you don't want, if you're a White Sox fan, you don't want
why even is Rick Hahn being allowed to make decisions right now? Like, granted, there's been nothing to suggest, but people who listen to have been adamant about this, that I don't think Rick Hahn is the answer in Chicago, and I think the White Sox need a new approach. But yeah, it's like this guy who has led this team absolutely nowhere for the greater part of the last 6 years, aside from one Central Division title where they were then immediately wiped out in the postseason by Houston. Why is this guy being allowed to call the shots still? And again, how is the best outcome here that you lose one of not just the best bats on the team, but also a guy who has been noted by everyone who covers that team, everyone who's familiar with it, as being like the clubhouse leader, like a very important voice in that group? Is this really just so you can make room for Andrew Vaughn, a slightly above league average bat? Like, I'm sure Vaughn will get better, but like it just feels like if the problems with the White Sox roster did not begin or end with Jose Abreu. He was very far from being part of the problem. And if this is something where it's like, oh, he wants more money than we feel comfortable giving a 36 or 37-year-old, or however old Abreu is, I know he's on the older side, first baseman with no ability to move to any other position. Okay, fine. I get that. But like, I don't know, man. I didn't get the sense from anything Abreu said after the season that he wanted to move on from Chicago. I got the sense he would happily stay there.
It's like the Contreras thing just in with the White Sox. Neither of these two guys who are just beloved by the fans and are important players to the team really want to leave Chicago, but everything just keeps pointing like they're leaving Chicago. And you're like, what are you doing? Just do the obvious thing. Just pay this person and resign them. What are you doing?
Like, what better are the White Sox going to do? If this is all part of a plan of like, oh, we're going to use that money to get better in our pitching staff, or we're going to use that money to go after, that's not going to happen, but we're going to go after Aaron Judge or something. That's one thing. But if the end result of this is no, we're just getting rid of Abreu so that Vaughn can play first base and we could so that it'll open up more at bats for other different guys who aren't as good. It's like, then what's the point ultimately?
Yeah.
It's too early to decide, but I did find it weird that it already feels so definitive that Jose Abreu is not coming back to Chicago, and it's like, why not?
Yeah.
Like,
And I wonder if that
what
leads to
reason
more
would you not bring
changes.
him back?
Like, is
Sorry?
Tim Anderson, like, is he part of this long-term
Look,
thing? Like,
I'm going to be really interested to watch this White Sox offseason, if only because I think if Hahn doesn't go, then this is his last offseason, and that this is the all right, you've got one last chance, make this team good, or else you're done. Which is also going to be interesting to see play out with regards to how they handle the managerial decision, because whoever Hahn hires, or let's be honest, whoever Jerry Reinsdorf approves of. Theoretically, at least, if Hahn were to be let go, the new incoming manager or front office regime would probably be like, "Hey, we'd like to have our own guy in charge, not the dude that the outgoing guy picked." So, I think we'll also get a better sense of how things are going to operate in Chicago when we start hearing more of the names connected to that managerial search, as opposed to what I hope is obvious, like screwing around with like mentioning Ozzie Guillen. It's like there's no way that the White Sox are stupid enough to do that.
They're not doing that.
No, it's like
I think they're just going to go the cheap way, and he might just be the right guy anyway, based on what we saw. But Miguel Cairo,
I think that makes sense too. Because the other thing about that is, if a new regime comes in and Cairo hasn't performed, it's easy enough to say, well, he was part of the old regime, and he's not a guy that was brought in at any great expense. He would be leaving anyway if Hahn were to go in the first place, or maybe they would move him into a different kind of role. But like,
it kind of feels a little bit like the Thompson aspect in
Philly. Yeah, it does. But I will be watching the White Sox offseason with great interest because, and I think especially like the way this roster has kind of been put together, the way it looks, like they have all these kinds of weird questions about them. The AL Central obviously is there for the taking, and I think the Guardians will go into the season probably as the favorite for the division, just based off of how they ended this year, the fact that they're a very young team with a very good farm system. Another team also that I'll be very interested to see what they do in the offseason, but regardless, the Central will be there for the taking, though. I don't think that we're going to go into next season unless Cleveland does some really out of character stuff.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to go into next season with a definitive, like,
it's like whenever the Rays win the AL East, you're like, okay, well, that was cool, but like,
I can see how that happened, but that doesn't mean I'm going to go into next season thinking it's going to happen again.
Yeah.
You
same sort of thing.
Yeah. And I think the White Sox with the right moves are very much right back in the conversation there.
We'll see. I mean, but from the Cubs aspect, the fact that they're linked there, do you think this signals? I think they're going to spend a little bit. My gut tells me that they're going to be buyers this winter. And I don't know.
My consistent feeling about the Cubs has been, and I know I said it when we talked about, I forget which player we talked about who's been previously connected to them, but
Correa.
I don't see them being Correa. That's right. I don't see them being big spenders this offseason. I see them being bigger spenders next offseason. Where they need one more year to kind of like sort through, okay, the prospects in our system, who's ready, who's not, the young guys on this team, who's actually part of this core, who is not, get rid of some of the money on the books to guys like Kyle Hendricks. Obviously, I don't think they're bringing Contreras back, so that will be money I think that they will pocket. Stroman's contract will expire. There might be an option somewhere in there, but either way, figure out what exactly they have it is fully in Seiya Suzuki, because he never really got the full season to do that because of injuries. I don't think they're ready to make that next step or to take that next step. I think it's more likely we see it the year after that, when we get a better sense of what the Cubs young core looks like. And when I think that ownership and front office group is going to align to be like, yes, these next 3 years, that's our window. We'll spend within that window. And then if it doesn't work, well, guess what we're doing again.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I think post-Chicago teams are going to be very, very fascinating to monitor this winter. An extension for the Cardinals general manager, Michael Girsch. Has he been good, John? Would you say he's been good?
Yeah, I think so. I think St. Louis has done a pretty good job. I think the one thing you can probably fault St. Louis for is not making the extra move necessary to take that team from NL Central contender / favorite to actual World Series contender. Mm-hmm. I think it's funny when that Jordan Montgomery Harrison Bader trade happened, and there was that feeling of, well, this doesn't really make sense for New York. Like, why are they getting rid of a useful starter in Montgomery for a guy in Bader who's not even going to be able to play for them until the postseason? I think a lot of the speculation at the time was, well, it's a trade for October for New York and for the rest of the season for the Cardinals, because they need more regular season help than they do postseason help. But that's not even really true because their pitching upgrades stopped at Jordan Montgomery and Jose Quintana for a rotation that really, really needed it. And I think for whatever reason, and similarly with the Juan Soto trade, where the rumor or the reporting was that St. Louis was the number 2 team to San Diego, but they weren't willing to part with Dylan Carlson, or whatever combination of prospects it was would have netted them Soto instead. That's, I think, the big thing that's been missing from St. Louis in the last few years is that willingness to go over the top, particularly at the deadline. Obviously, they made the big trade for Goldschmidt. They made the big trade for Arenado, although I think especially in the case of Arenado, you can argue that trade cost them essentially nothing. But there hasn't really been that like killer instinct. And I don't know if that's an ownership thing. I don't know if that's an overconfidence in the way the roster is built. I don't know if that's just a general mission we'll get to the postseason and see what happens. But at the very least, I think, especially this year's Cardinals team, and that's all I can really go on for now. I didn't really get the feeling that team was going to make a lot of noise in the postseason. That did not strike me as a team that was really going to make a deep run, because the roster that had been assembled was not really the kind of roster I think you equate with deep kind of run. They didn't have the aces up top. They didn't really have that long, deep lineup. They didn't really have that shutdown bullpen. Every one of these teams currently in the championship series, you can point to one aspect of their team where it's like, yeah, that is essential for them to be here in October to a certain degree. The Phillies have Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola. The Padres have a great bullpen plus Manny Machado and Juan Soto in the lineup, plus a very good starting rotation with Darvish, Snell, and Musgrove. The Astros have everything the Astros have. The Yankees, for all their weirdness, have elite combinations. The Cardinals never really had that, with the exception of Goldschmidt and Arenado as that kind of middle of the order combination, and some individual good bullpen performances like Ryan Helsley. They didn't really have that kind of. They were competent, I think. And I think if you want to ding the Cardinals for anything, and what I think I would ding them for, is they are very commonly competent. They are always contenders. They are always part of the race. They're never really more than that. Yeah. You don't ever really go into the postseason with the Cardinals feeling like, yeah, this team is just going to run roughshod over the rest of the league. It never really happens. And again, I don't know if that's the combination of Girsch and President of Baseball Operations John Mozeliak in terms of planning. I don't know if that's ownership refusing to spend more, but that always to me feels like the missing piece in St. Louis, that they just do not get themselves over the top the same way that other teams do.
And now they're entering a weird offseason. I mean, looks like Yachty, Wainwright, and Pujols all gone. A lot of veterans out the door.
Everyone's getting a year older. And I think the good thing for St. Louis is they do have a really good farm system that's going to keep producing good young talent that we're already starting to see make its way up. But
are they the favorites going into next year?
For the Central, I'm probably. I'd have to think so. I'm not, unless the Cubs or the Brewers do really big things. I imagine I'd be making the Cardinals my preseason NL Central pick. But again, like, I'd be fine doing that because that's one of the safest bets you can make is the Cardinals will win the NL Central. But I'm not going to bet on anything more from that team unless it actually does the thing that it's been needing to do for a while now and go out and get that missing piece at the deadline or at some point during the season to make itself better.
John, the big four of the shortstop free agents: Trey Turner, Dansby Swanson, Carlos Correa, Xander Bogaerts. If you had to rank those four right now going into this winter in terms of any team looking to just get the best player for the next 2 to 3 years at that spot, how would you do it? Like, who would you prioritize 1 through 4?
I think my priority number 1 is Turner. I think he's the
best. Turner number 1?
I think his combination of offense and speed is unmatched by any other option out there. I know defensively he's not the strongest. I know we saw in the division series he made some kind of bizarre plays that seemed like I don't know. Trey Turner just seemed kind of weirdly checked out during the series. Like there was something going on, and he was the only one privy to it. It was a weird series for him.
Yeah.
But I think Turner ultimately is probably the best. I mean, I think also age is important here.
They're all relatively close in age.
Yeah, but like Turner and Correa are younger than Bogaerts and Swanson, and that does make a big difference. I know you said just for the next 2 or 3 years, so it makes less of a difference in there.
Turner's 29. What is Dansby? Dansby's not young. What is Dansby?
Dansby's 30.
He just turned 30? No, he's 28. That's what I thought. I thought Dansby was younger than that.
I'm sorry. Xander is 30.
I was going to say, I thought Dansby was like 28. I was going to say, I thought he was younger than everybody. Okay.
So But I'm still probably taking Turner 1 just because the tools and the ability, especially with the speed to change the game, is especially as I'd be interested too to see next year what the pitch clock does in terms of stolen bases and also what the kind of new rule on throwing over to first does for that.
Do you
By
think you get
pitchers.
more stolen bases or less next year?
I think there will be more opportunities to run and more
Yeah.
opportunities to steal based on the ability to
Time the pitch clock?
yeah, exactly, essentially to game the pitch clock and to time it. After that, I mean, it's tough because honestly, like I could say they're all just they're 1A, 1B, 1C, and 1D. I don't think there's any real clear, heavy separation between the four of them.
Mhm.
I just personally think I would go with Turner. If I couldn't go with Turner, then I would probably go with Correa. I think probably the best tools of that group individually, the best defender of the four, I think.
I have a take.
Okay.
I
Is
think
it going to be
Correa's
Dansby
4 for
Swanson?
me.
Okay. I can understand that. I want to hear your reasoning, but I can understand that just off the bat.
I think at this point, when you're getting near in 30 and this kind of money with these four and what it's going to cost to bring in one of these four for a 2 to 3 year timetable, even if you're a contender, if I'm doing this, like I am betting on you being available and ready to go for a full postseason. And I just, I don't know if I'm there with Correa anymore. I
There
don't
have been a
think
lot of injuries to worry
yeah.
about with him. He's
And
definitely been injury prone.
Dansby, the one thing about Dansby, and he had a great year, it seems like the winner aspect to him rubs a lot of clubs the right way, where it seems like there is a respect around baseball for the way he goes into each and every day playing the game, and that he's someone you want kind of in the war room come playoff time. And I mean, he was, I think, of every Brave who I saw after the series loss, he was the most upset. He took
Well,
it the
he
hardest.
I think the thing with a lot of the Braves players is they know they're all coming back next year, and
Yeah.
you know that they should be in this position again next year. Swanson
I
is
don't
the
think Danzy's back.
no,
My
and
gut
I
tells me
think
I don't think he's back.
and I think there's an understanding on his part that this was his last run with this team, and
Yeah.
that wherever he goes from here, it's not going to be the same in any capacity.
I mean, look at
Um,
Freeman. It's like he had the best year of his career in Los Angeles, and you would never have known that based on the vibes and everything else. Like, it's it's just it's tough,
well,
and
I
it
can, but I can understand too with Swanson, like the durability, especially this year played all 162 games. The
yeah.
year before that played 160. Great defender, good hit. It's really transformed himself into a good hitter. Definitely seems to be one of those positive clubhouse guys. I can very much see that he would be in demand for a lot of teams. I think more so than Correa, who I think doesn't have quite as good as a reputation, particularly when it comes to the durability. And I wonder if there are teams that wonder about his whole, I'm going to take a short deal with the Twins, and then a year later be like, actually, no, I don't want. I'm going to look for the money again. And it's like,
right.
I get what you're saying, that it's like, can you actually make a commitment to a
Yeah.
team that does not begin with, well, how much are you paying me first? Which, granted, that is Correa's right. And
Mhm.
that Correa needs to look out for Carlos Correa needs to look out for Carlos Correa. But at the same time, I think I can understand there probably are some teams who may be a little turned off by the last year plus of Correa. And I mean, if nothing else, like it definitely, what caught us all by surprise so much about him joining Minnesota was the fact that it's like, really? It took
Mhm.
Minnesota to end this? There wasn't any really good team that was like, oh, hey, Carlos Correa is still available for literally just money. Let's sign Carlos Correa. That
Can
so
I tell
many
you
teams.
my 1 through 4?
Yeah.
I got one Trey. I would still go Trey Turner over 2 to 3 years span. I would like give me Trey Turner. And there,
Yeah.
like the hilarious part of this is I think there is a distinct possibility that Trey and Dansby flip this winter, which would
That
be
would be really fun.
hilarious. I would not rule that out, folks. Turner and Dansby playing for the rival teams next year. But I would do Trey 1. I would do Bogarts 2.
Okay.
I would do Dansby 3, Correa 4.
So what puts Bogarts over Dansby for you?
I think I trust Bogart's hitting more in a 3-year
Okay.
time span.
That's
Like
fair.
I just trust it more. I trust what I've seen longer from Xander, and he's 30.
I think he's behind Turner in terms of
Yes,
reliability when it comes to what you can expect production
right.
wise. I think
And
the
I would just be
worry
terrified with Dansby or Correa. Dansby and Correa scare me so much more than Trey and Xander.
That's fair. I think the one thing I worry about with Bogarts, where I might put him 3 behind Correa,
Mhm.
like, and Dansby's 4th in mine, but not because of anything Dansby does wrong. I just like the other 3 more in terms of what they bring to the table.
Mhm.
But the thing that would scare me, I think, in terms of putting Bogarts ahead of Swanson, and that one really feels to me like either or, it doesn't really matter,
Mhm.
is the defense and how long Bogarts can stick at shortstop, whether or not he's a third baseman long term, a la Corey Seager. I don't think that's something that necessarily has to happen like this coming year. The defensive metrics all seem to think Bogaerts is at the very least fine at the position, but I don't think he has the same upside that Correa and Swanson definitely do, and that Turner, I think, does to a certain degree over him defensively, where you can feel good about those other three being long-term shortstops. I think it's less of a guarantee with Bogaerts that he sticks there long-term. But over the next 2 to 3 years, I think that's no problem. And then I think Bogaerts is a guy who probably moves into a corner outfield spot sometime after the next 2 or 3 seasons.
Which still valuable.
And he's still a really good hitter on top of all that. Like you said, the consistency and the reliability of his offense, you know what you're going to get every season. He brings power. He brings a lot of line drives, a really solid approach at the plate. He is durable. He stays healthy.
All very important during a 2 to 3 year title window. And that's what any of the teams that are signing one of these 4 players, that's what they're thinking. Like, it doesn't make sense to sign any of these 4 unless you are thinking title in a 2 to 3 year span.
No, and I think that's the thing. All 4 of these guys, I think we're going to see go to championship contenders. Yeah. I don't think there's any, because none of these guys are young enough. I think that any of the rebuilding teams can talk themselves into it. Although it'd be really, really interesting to see. I think there are some dark horse teams that could get involved because of the price point that. And I'd like to note that one of them, and I just thought of this, so it's I'm not basing it really on anything hard, but I really think the Orioles should be in on one of these 4 guys.
Who would you say is the most Orioles option? Well, there is a connection, right, with Elias and Correa.
I really think and now that you mentioned that too, I'm gonna start getting in on this the same way we were trying to make Correa to Detroit happen last winter. Correa to Baltimore makes a ton of sense.
I would love that.
A ton of sense.
Let's just make I want the AL East to be a full-on bloodbath. The more we can make the AL East just an absolute bloodbath going into next year and the next couple of years, let's do it.
Well, because the thing too with the Orioles is they can offer him. They'd be like, you know what? If all you want is a short deal with a ton of money up front, fine.
That's our MO, man. We got you.
Yeah, it's fine. They're just not going to want to do something backloaded.
Yep.
Because they're going to have to start paying for Rutschman and Mullins and all these other guys sooner rather than later.
But see, that speaks to the Correa question. Is like, we went to Correa of the 4. Who's most likely to sign with a bad team? It's Correa. And that's like one of those.
Well, because I think which is, it sounds weird because I don't want to make it sound like, I think Correa is greedy, but I think
it's not greedy. It's just, we're not sure like how invested he is in like just winning and just
he's already won a World Series.
Exactly.
Dansby
has 1, 2, Trey has,
every one of those guys has.
And Xander, they all have.
Yeah. Every one of those guys has at least 1 World Series ring, and some of them have 2. Like, I think Xander has 2 and Turner has 2.
Yes.
No, yes.
Turner was on the
Dodgers.
19.
No, the Dodgers got Turner in 2021, right?
Was it 2021 or 2020?
Yeah, no, it's 2020.
I thought he was on 2020. Was he not?
Oh God, memory is hard.
Was that the other Turner?
Justin Turner?
Yeah, that's.
Well, Justin Turner's been there since a dawn.
Well, there's also Chris Taylor. Yeah, I guess maybe not. Maybe.
But either way,
Trey was not on the 2020 team.
No, but all of those guys have at least 1 World Series ring, and Bogaerts has 2. So I think for them, definitely, it's not so much. I think they want to be on contending teams. I don't think either of them is going to go be like Chris Bryant and be like, nah, man, just give me $150 million just to get to hang out.
Shout out to Chris Bryant though for that. Like, an all-time great move.
Seriously, like if a championship is not the most important thing to you,
or you already got it,
why would you not just take as much money as you can to go play in the most low pressure environment imaginable in a kick-ass city and state like Denver?
Never do an interview ever again. None of
the local media ever cares. The fans will always show up no matter what. Your owners barely even know you exist. Like,
yes.
But no, I don't necessarily think that, or better said, I think that all 4 of these guys will end up with contending teams anyway, because like you said, those are the teams most likely to want to be interested in them in the first place. I think Correa is the only guy where a less than contending team might be interested because of the idea that as the youngest of those 4, I believe the youngest of those 4, he offers the longest window of competitiveness, which is, again, why I think a team like the Orioles, or here's another one, the Mariners, would make a ton of sense for him. I think he would make a lot of sense for a team that doesn't really have a long-term shortstop solution. And I think Seattle also qualifies for that, given that they traded Noelvi Marte. I can see him being one of those kind of mid-tier team, or going to one of those kind of second-tier teams that has a little more money or that has a little more payroll space to play with, if not necessarily more money. Whereas I think a player like Swanson, like you said, is more likely to end up in a place like Los Angeles or New York. Maybe not New York because they're just going to call up Anthony Volpe, I think, and have that be that.
Yeah,
but,
I don't think he's a New York guy.
Or in the Mets, or not the Mets because they have Lindor, but you know what I mean, in one of those top tier teams. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe there is a route where he returns to Atlanta because he can't find the long-term deal he wants, and the Braves are just like, you know what? Yeah, we'll bring it back for 2 or 3 more years. It's fine.
We'll see.
I don't see it,
see what
but
happens.
I think, or even Boston. I think Swanson would make a ton of sense for Boston.
Makes a lot of sense in Boston.
Like, if they're going to let Bogarts walk, I can totally see, and he is going to walk, at least in terms of opting out of his deal. I can totally see a world in which they reach out to Dansby Swanson's people and are like, want to just come here? So people can say Dansby Swanson. God, that was awful. I'm never doing that again.
That was
that was a really bad Boston accent. I am.
Mine would be worse.
Sorry.
John, we'll end on this. Your ALCS predictions. Who do you have winning each side?
I think Houston wins the ALCS. I think Houston. I picked Houston as my World Series winner at the start of the postseason. I haven't seen anything to dissuade me from that. That is a really, really good.
You're just team. All in because Jordan is just the new Big Papi, and you have a soft.
He is though. That's a thing. We can't discount that.
Yeah.
But that's a really, really good team. It's a really good pitching staff. It's a really good bullpen. It's a really good lineup. They're really good defensively. Dusty Baker's a very good manager. I'm just not seeing what the problem is with that roster. Especially, I think they're going to be able to take advantage of a New York team that has just been up and down like crazy over the last week. That obviously will go from winning this series tonight to flying to Houston to literally playing in game 1 like in less than 24 hours. I don't think that's ideal for the Yankees, although they will have Garrett Cole. Well, no, they won't have Garrett Cole on the mound for that one, will they? No. So that's the other part of it. They won't be able to start that series off with Cole. So I like Houston in that one. On the NL side, I literally have no idea. I have no idea who's going to win the series, which I love. I love that the series is just chaos ultimate, but I have absolutely no clue who's going to win. I think
we're getting a rematch. I think we're getting a 2009 rematch.
You think it's Yankees Phillies?
Yes, okay. I think we're getting Yankees Phillies. I think the Yankees are winning the World Series. I think we're getting the 1995-1996 return. John, do you know why I am citing those 2 years?
Because you were alive during them?
I was alive. That is true. People forget. 95, the Braves won the World Series. 96, the Yankees follow that up.
Okay, I see what you're doing. I would just like to note that the last time the Phillies won a World Series, we got hit by the single worst global recession since the Great Depression. So, and given the way economic markers and trends are going, another Phillies World Series is almost certainly going to be followed by another recession. So, if you have money in the stock market, you really need to be rooting against the Phillies, man. Like we don't need that again. But I think ultimately San Diego is the deeper team here. I think part of the problem the Phillies are going to run into is that bullpen is going to have to be used heavy over the next.
We don't even know what David Robertson's status is, right? Like,
he's on the roster, but we don't know obviously how good he's going to be.
They trust him, and
And I think too, like Philly's big advantage throughout this postseason so far has been the 1-2 of Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola. Zach Wheeler obviously starting tonight, Nola starting tomorrow. But I think the Phillies are well set up to counter that because of having Darvish and Snell and Musgrove. Obviously they're in, and the other thing too is, I don't love, I'm sure Padres fans don't love the idea of Mike Clevenger starting an NLCS game, but the other side of that is the Phillies are going to have to ask Ranger Suarez and possibly like, what's his name? From Tech, Kyle Gibson. To start a playoff game. And that's way, way worse. So I just think ultimately the Phillies
don't tell Trevor Plouffe.
Floofy?
Yeah. It's his guy.
I ultimately think the Padres are just a deeper team, and I think this is the area too where I think team depth in a 5-game series doesn't matter as much. Team depth in a 7-game series, I think, is much more important. And I think the Padres are ultimately a deeper team. So give me a Houston San Diego World Series.
We disagree on both.
Give me that Houston San Diego World Series that is going to make Rob Manfred tear out what little hair he has left.
Well, hold on. That was not necessary, John. That we could have lived without that one. There's all kinds of things to attack Rob Manfred for, but that was not one of them. Let's settle down here. Read the room, Jon Tayler.
I'm really interested.
We're on video.
If we do get a Padres Astros World Series, I'm really excited to hear the frantic, angry meetings among MLB's sales and advertising people about like, what are we supposed to do with this? Which any fan would tell you, it's like, okay, you build it around Manny Machado and Yordan Alvarez and Justin Verlander and Yu Darvish and all the cool players. They're gonna be
And
like,
how much Fernando
this
Tatis Jr. sucks.
yeah, just make a whole Tatis narrative. I don't care, but like, yeah, that's my World
Are we
Series
sure
pick.
Tatis is good?
We're not, honestly, at this point.
No.
Like, he's been hurt and then he got popped for
I know, I was
steroids.
just doing a
Like,
bit. That was
it's
more
not
of a bit.
ideal. It's not what you want.
Another surgery this week, I saw.
No, well, yeah, I mean, he's taking advantage of the downtime he's going to have. Although someone made the point, like, the further the Padres go in the postseason, the fewer games Tatis will miss next season, because these games being played count toward his suspension time. So Padres' long postseason run, secret op to get Fernando Tatis back earlier in the season.
Yeah. I also just want my number one. I'm rooting for the Padres of the 4 remaining. Like, that's who I want to see win. I want AJ Preller to be vindicated for trying to win baseball games and to try and win a title and do whatever he can. I want that story to win. I
want to see how Philadelphia handles a World Series championship and the Eagles potentially being the best team in the NFL.
Yikes.
Well, I think that's going to produce some truly...
Some men just want to watch the world burn.
Yeah, exactly. I want chaos. And I think Philly brings the highest chaos potential and quotient. But I think my World Series pick ultimately is Houston against San Diego and go from there. Which would be an amazing series. That's the thing. Any combination of these 4 teams going forward is going to make for a great World Series no matter what.
That's fair. Jon Tayler, what can the good folks check out from you and the team over at Fangraphs.com?
So obviously, given the discourse around early playoff exits, we've focused a lot on that. I mentioned Jay Jaffe's piece on the kind of the history of these short series and the fact that there is this seemingly growing disconnect between regular season results and postseason results. That went out yesterday, Monday. Everyone should check that out if they haven't. We'll be running something on Wednesday by Dan Szymborski in a similar vein, where he uses the fancy value of math to show that, hey, there's not really any, or better said, this is just how the playoffs work. That this is just what happens in the postseason. Here's the numbers to prove it, basically. Beyond that, we'll have our usual postseason coverage. We'll be writing off every game. We'll be having... there's actually, it's too late now. There's a Game 1 chat going on for this game, an LCS Game 1, but by the time everyone hears this, LCS Game 1 will be...
But there'll be more chats.
There'll be more chats, though. We'll be doing more chats. And obviously, we'll be covering any of the major stories that pop up through the postseason. Last week we had a piece on whether or not Robbie Ray against Yordan, or what was the thinking for the Mariners using Robbie Ray against Yordan Alvarez, pieces on Garrett Cole's curveball usage, pieces on Jose Alvarado being the most important reliever in the Phillies bullpen. Our editor-in-chief, Meg Rowley, had a wonderful piece on from the scene of Game 3 in Seattle, just how that felt as a Mariners fan. So we're covering the postseason every which way. And then obviously once the postseason is done, which is actually coming up pretty close on us, we'll have our top 50 free agents. So keep an eye out for that, because once the World Series is over, free agency starts pretty much right away. So we're going to have to dive right back into that cesspool. So yeah, coming down to Fangraphs, help us keep the cesspool full. Get yourself a membership, $60 a year for ad-free membership. Download our app, follow the playoffs along with that for all your Fangraphs stats needs.
Do that today. Jon Tayler, always a pleasure. I will talk to you next week.
Yep.